Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for another episode, and I'm absolutely thrilled to have with me Eva Sheie today, fellow Texan. I don't get to do that too often, so I always have to announce that right up front. Eva, first of all, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Tom. I got here as fast as I could.
Well, you did well, and Rice University grad, which is where my mother went to college. So there.
It's true. I did my master's at Rice, and I remember my advisor in my undergrad said, "Everywhere you go, you need to bring a sweater." And I remember thinking, why would I need to bring a sweater? It's hot there. But she was talking about inside, which my poor Minnesota brain did not compute what she meant. But I learned very quickly. And then I got down here and I said, why does anyone ever leave? It's warm here all the time. So that was it. And
That was
I've
it.
been a Texan longer than I was ever a Minnesotan.
Okay. I've lived here all my life except for 4 years in Michigan. So there you go. So tell us, Eva, a little bit about your professional background.
Sure. When I was actually around that same time from the sweater story, I had been working in public radio, so I was pretty young. That was like college. It wasn't a college radio station, but it was an NPR affiliate in the Twin Cities, and I learned how radio worked, and I was absolutely in love with it, except for the part about making $5 an hour. I think I still have a pay stub here somewhere that says like $5.15 an hour. And so it was sort of burned into my brain. I love this, but it's not practical. And I was also going to school for music. And so I spent most of my 20s in Houston being a professional musician, and I played in the opera and the ballet. I played the viola. But I also really liked to work and I loved computers. And one day I decided, hey, I'm going to start my own business. And I spent a bunch of time like, what can I do? And I decided I'm going to be a professional organizer. And in about 1 month, I realized people who need professional organizers are awful. I didn't think that was viable, but I did love starting something that was mine. I was a little bit addicted to that part of the process and the like owning my life and not being beholden to like a job. And I started working for a guy who had web directories, and I spent 5 years with him actually. And so I learned how to build websites and do SEO when they were new. And that led to a bigger job in that space, and I got really good at that time helping both LASIK surgeons and plastic surgeons get patients, because what I got addicted to was if I put something online and it makes somebody do something, then we get paid. And it was more than getting paid, it was almost like, I know I can help you find the good ones, the good guys, because I know who the good guys are, and now I know how to help you find them. And that turned out to be a really useful skill, which grew into a much bigger website related job. And then eventually in marketing, in digital marketing. And then my heart landed kind of in education. So using education to convert customers. And through all of this, the real through line is I'm still helping patients find good doctors. And that makes me really happy. It makes me feel like I'm doing something good in the world, but it's also like a great puzzle and it's interesting every day. And so, in one of those roles that I had a really smart and wise boss who said, we need to get in front of this podcasting thing. And I know you can do it. And I went, oh my gosh, can I? And so she cleared the way. This is a very big corporate job where people were pretty territorial. And if you got to do something cool, they would get mad and they would try to sabotage you. It was not a very healthy environment, but she ran cover for me all the way through those projects, and so I got 2 podcasts built there, and one was for the CEO, and the other was for it was customer-facing podcast, and that was it. That for me, that was like, "How come I didn't do this 15 years ago? This is the greatest thing I've ever been able to do," because you can take the podcast and you can apply it to any marketing goal, and you can use it for any strategy, and it does all the things that marketing is supposed to do, which is build relationships and build trust. And in medicine specifically, patients truly they just want to know you, the doctor or the provider or the people in the office. And so it checks every box you could ever need to check in a way that I don't think any other marketing channel does.
That's the best explanation of a podcast I've ever heard from a marketing perspective. That will become a certified clip. Thank you very much. So tell us about the Axis and your
Mhm.
journey in creating that platform.
Many people in 2020 went through significant changes both in their personal lives and their professional lives, and I was not immune from that. And so at the time, I at the job where I made the first 2 podcasts, I actually was laid off, and I had a 2-month-old, maybe she was a little older than that. I had a newborn at the time, and it was the last day of maternity leave, and if lawyers ever listen or humans, like people with emotions, listen to me tell that story, the first question is always, "Is that even legal?" And no, it's not. You can't lay somebody off on while they're on maternity leave and even if it is legal, it's, like, morally questionable to do that to somebody, and my husband is amazing, but he's a teacher, and so there's no world where I really can take off a lot of time from work, or we have to sell our house and move somewhere else, which I didn't wanna do either. So, many weeks of being awake in the middle of the night and trying to figure out what am I gonna do, I it was almost like lightning, and it was about 2:15 in the morning, and so me and the baby, who's 5 now, we were awake at our usual time eating, and I realized I only need 4 customers to do a podcast with me to be okay. That's easy. 4? That's all? And I almost woke my husband up, and I almost said, "I figured it out." Like, I let him sleep, and I told him in the morning, but that was the idea, and so I went to past SEO clients who I still had good relationships with, and I pitched it, which is something I didn't realize I do all the time, but if I have an idea and I think it's good, then the first thing I do is pitch it to whoever will tolerate me. And I remember I drove down to Cypress to Northwest Houston to talk to a very old and trusted client, and I said, "Here's what I think I'm gonna do next, and here's how I think it will work, and would you do this with me?" And he said, "Yeah, I will." And I said, "You will?" And the next thing out of his mouth was, "Let's start right now." And I said, "No, can I have 3 months? I have more work to do to figure out how we're gonna do this." And he said, "No, we're starting now. You just do it." And so in the way that, like, great clients who trust you do, like, he knew in that moment that I needed to be shoved off the cliff, and he did that. And he still is someone that I work with, but I'm extremely grateful for professionally because he has this bias for action, and so if I get really analysis paralysis, then he's knock it off, keep going. And so we've done that for each other a lot over the years, and he was the one who did it that day. So then I went to several others and I got quite a few yeses right out of the gate, and I was up and running. And I did everything those first years like you did. You figure out what all the jobs are and then you start breaking off pieces and giving them to other people and keep the parts you like and let other people do the parts that can be scaled and repeated. It was really about building a system that I could where I could do that, right? So fast forward 5 years and now I do all the development and the creative and the concept. So if somebody comes to me and wants to build a podcast, then I actually go in I try to go in for a half a day at least, if not a full day, and spend really uninterrupted quality time having a creative process where we come up with what is your very best podcast for you, the people who are here, who are involved in it, and for the customers that you're trying to get. We get really crystal clear on who that audience is, and we build an episode framework that's repeatable so that you're not sitting around every week going, "What are we gonna talk about this week?" What your vehicle is for talking about whatever topic you wanna talk about, but that stays the same like a TV show. The premise is the premise, and that's the show that we have. I have loved it. I love every minute of it, and I continually improve the process. One of the best things I did this year was go to PRX's podcast workshop that they travel around and do. And if you ever get a chance to go to that, Tom, you should definitely try and get in because they took me through that's the NPR's podcasting arm, and they took me through their creative process, which took mine up. It was pretty good, but it took it to It turned it up to 11.
Let me turn to this concept of trust and how story building, or excuse me, storytelling can really help anyone, but we're going to focus on podcasters, build trust between patients in the healthcare arena.
What that requires first is understanding what that particular patient needs in that space to build trust, and it is very often attractive. I don't want to generalize too much, but to male healthcare providers, the idea of replacing the relationship building process so that they can save time or be more efficient is really attractive. And so I see over and over like people spend millions of dollars trying to come up with technology to eliminate the part of the process where you meet your doctor and decide this is going to be my doctor, because they don't think it's important and they think it takes up a lot of time when really it's everything. And so finding places where you can save time without eliminating the process of getting to know that provider is really important in marketing, in healthcare marketing specifically. Trying to think of a good example. That doctor from Houston that I mentioned earlier, the one who kicked me off the cliff, he will call and tell me when it works, because I require him to tell me when it works because I need to know. And he said recently the patient's husband was in the consultation and she didn't have any questions. And so he turned to the husband and he said, "What questions do you have?" And he said, "I don't have any. I listened to every episode of your podcast and I know exactly what you're going to say. So we're good." So it does this beautiful thing if you can get people to listen, of actually scaling doctor time. And that isn't that hard to do, really. You just have to sit down and talk. I remember really early in my career, having started as a content writer, that I would beg them to record themselves at work and just give me the recording, and nobody would ever do it. I should have called it a podcast back then, and they probably would have helped me, but they didn't.
My sense with healthcare providers, specifically doctors, would be they might be too technical. Is that true? Or is that just a stereotype that I have in my head because they have to communicate with people like me, patients, all day long?
Yeah. In outside of retail medicine, so anything where the doctor is actually responsible for some part of the sales process, which is bonding with that person in front of them, that's a very common thing to happen. And if you are that technical, you can actually use a podcast to your favor too, because you can break down really complicated concepts ahead of time and get people to listen. There's quite a few amazing platforms out there where doctors try to do this, and I run into a lot of people trying to solve this problem in other ways. I have a friend who built an app for urology because he was getting burned out and he didn't want to keep reserving his best self from the patients who were in front of him. And I believe urology is who is the front line for prostate cancer. And so he found himself not wanting to talk to these people. And he felt guilty about that. And so he started building an app where he was capturing himself so that he could give them his best self. And that is just such a good representation of how many different ways there are to solve that particular problem.
You have used the phrase engagement. I think you use it in the context of patient engagement. I would say customer engagement, but whatever words we might use, is that different than brand trust in your mind?
The first thing that occurs to me between the individual provider and the larger brand organization is it just depends on the size of the healthcare organization. If one doctor is working alone or is the face of a practice, they are the brand. And so you have to present someone like that differently than many of the clients I work with are a brand, and every doctor within that brand represents a larger story or a larger picture. So I know I have a podcast where the brand story it is for a healthcare practice is actually where dreams become real. And so everything that we build for them and every way that they speak to their audience is about helping their patients realize that they can help their dream become true, which is a wild way to talk about healthcare, is extremely unusual to be that emotional in a healthcare brand. But they've been very successful with it because it speaks to the patient and not to the education of the brilliant surgeon behind the microphone or in the office.
So, what are some of the challenges around either ethical boundaries in marketing or compliance issues in storytelling for healthcare professionals?
Oh, I like this question. There is a huge problem with crazy healthcare information in podcasting. You're kind of taking me back to the reason I started doing this in the first place was because I wanted people to find the good guys. But how do you do that? Like, short of me saying, I'm only going to work with the good guys because I know them personally. Like, it's a larger problem, and credentialing isn't necessarily the way to the truth either. I don't know. How have you thought about credentialing? Have you ever crossed into that world in from compliance into credentialing?
My father was a university professor, so I lived in the credentialing world for a long time. I find it to be meaningless, but
That's the problem, right? Is that it is meaningless. Here's an example. I was a good 15 years into my career with plastic surgeons before I learned that to be board certified in plastic surgery, which is an aesthetic specialty, that they do not have to prove that they can deliver aesthetically pleasing results on patients. And the problem with that is the entire profession says the way you find a good one is, are they board certified? That was a bit of a crisis, but my own ethical crises with this space go way back. And I remember being on an airplane and taking a call back when cell phones were new. And I was like, look at me, I'm on the phone on an airplane. And a doctor was asking me if I knew how he could find third world patients to practice on. And I remember thinking, what is happening? No, I can't help you with that.
I think I come out of a different compliance world, and that's largely in anti-corruption compliance and anti-money laundering compliance and some export control. But in the AML or anti-money laundering space, that's banks, financial institutions, insurance companies, or what we would call regulated industries. But regulated industries is a much broader term, and medical care is as regulated an industry as any other in the United States, but people don't call it a regulated industry. So HIPAA or a plethora of other regulations. Do any of those other regulations either constrain or impact what you can do in the podcast format?
I think what you're describing is what attracted me to podcasting was that there's n- there is very little compliance happening. And so I'm kind of on my own. Like I follow my own ethical boundaries, but my doctors, the clients I work with are all constrained by their own ethical obligations too to their professional organizations and to the law. So I don't have to worry about it too much. But HIPAA is interesting because so few of the people responsible for actually maintaining it understand what it is in the first place. And I did a fair amount of education in that area maybe 10 years ago when they were really trying to get their heads around it. And I think they're maybe past it now. But it's, first of all, it's boring. And then, second of all, it's totally misunderstood. And it's more about the effort that you put into protection than the protection itself. So I enjoy knowing a lot of things about a lot of things, and that makes me valuable to the people I work with because I can make them feel better and worry less about things like that. But yeah, I know government regulation, it all makes my head spin. So I'd rather tell stories about how patients' lives were changed. It sounds better.
Let me turn to the Axis and what led you to found the Axis?
Getting laid off, that was number 1. I knew there was no way I could go start applying for jobs, not just because I had a little baby to take care of, but because I was done working for other people. I just couldn't do it anymore. And my hardest day here, it's all mine. It's my own. I own all of the struggles, the successes there, and I'm not being psychologically manipulated by somebody else who in a corporate environment who has goals and or secret agendas that I'm not being told about or like all the stuff that comes with working in a big company. It just is not part of my life and it's so beautiful. So, it was inevitable that I was gonna go back to being self-employed someday, and I just felt better when I got there. Okay, this timing is terrible, but I'm gonna make the best of it.
What do you see for the Axis down the road, Eva?
I like the newness of both the content. So you could put me on a podcast that I have done 300 episodes of, and I still enjoy whatever's coming along. And to me, that's the sign that I built a great show, is that it can continue to be interesting for the people who are doing it forever and they'll never get, what do they call it? Pod fade? Like, they'll just never get there. Kinda like you, I don't see ever fading. Maybe certain shows come and go, but you're always podcasting because it's the best medium, if we wanna bring it full circle back to where we started. And then what I am privileged enough to do now is in the stage that I'm at in the business, I'm able to help other people grow in their own career. So while I'm learning to build teams and be a founder and an owner and grow this business and grow and work with new customers all the time, I'm also able to create opportunities for other people in a time where there aren't a lot of jobs being created, not especially in marketing where I think AI is terrorizing people into thinking there are not jobs, but we're out in front of AI because something has to feed AI, and that is there is no better food for it than podcasting. I think we're in a really good position for the future. So I'm excited about that.
Eva, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode, but before we leave, I wanted to ask you if our listeners wanted to connect with you, find out more about the Axis or any of the topics we've touched on today, what
Mhm.
might be the best place or places for them to go?
If you have a good sense of humor and are on Instagram, we are at Axis Podcasts, AXIS. And my website is theaxis.io, axis.io. And the Axis is a joke because when I was younger, I had a boyfriend who called me the Axis of Eva. 'Cause- So now you can't forget it because that's where it comes from. Yep.
Very cool. Eva, I wanted to thank you again for taking the time to visit with me, and I hope we can continue this conversation.
I don't know where the time went. I talked a lot and you didn't. So hopefully that was what you were hoping for, Tom.
That's the way it's supposed to be.
Okay, good. Appreciate you. Thank you.